The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM-LP at 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you're free to do so. Just send us an email if you end up using any content. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville, specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop. In this interview, Burst spoke with an anarchist leader and IWW labor organizer in West Virginia about the work that went into the recent teacher strikes that went slightly wildcat and ended in a partial victory for the teachers after 12 days of walkouts by public school teachers across the state, and has inspired labor organizing among communication workers in West Virginia, teachers across Oklahoma, Arizona, New Jersey, and elsewhere. They cover right-to-work regimes in the U.S. South, the organizing model of the IWW, dual union membership, General Strike 2018, 55 Strong, and where Michael sees things moving forward. If you want even more audio in your ear, check out our website for the interview Burst did with Antti, a member of Moscow Anarchist Black Cross, about repression of anarchists and anti-fascists in Russia and Crimea, including the frame-up of criminal conspiracy, torture, disappearances, and criminalization of supposed statements on social media. There has been a call for international solidarity actions with A-Team and Antifa in the Russian Federation from today, March 11th through the 18th, as well as a day of solidarity specifically on the 18th, called for by Moscow Anarchist Black Cross in the run-up to the first round of Russian presidential elections. Check out our show notes for links. Also, if you're in Asheville this week at Firestorm on Thursday, March 15th at 6 p.m., there'll be a presentation by another Russian anarchist comrade entitled The Western Left and Media Politics of Russia in the Context of the War in Ukraine. This event is wheelchair accessible and will be followed by a question and answer period. After that, we have a short interview with Miel, an Asheville resident and co-organizer of the Southeast Trans and/or Women's Action Camp, or SETWAC, which will take place outside of Asheville from April 26th through 28th. We talk about the camp and the importance of having an eco-struggle space be centered away from andro or masculine gender expressions. We also talk about this group's fundraising platform and the troubles they've had there, plus a link for the new fundraising push and how to get involved. To learn more about this project, you can visit setwac.blackblogs.org, that's SETWAC, and to donate, you can go to paypal.me/SETWAC2018. But first, here are some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what?
After I first ran for Ohio governor, do you know what the fascist fart goblins of the Ohio General Assembly did? They passed a law that anyone in prison cannot take public office, which disqualifies me from becoming governor from prison. It disqualifies me even if the majority of voters in Ohio simultaneously suffer aneurysms and write my name on their ballots. I think that this obvious and silly anti-Swain legislation says a few things about these poor deluded hierarchs. First, think about the constant lip service the hierarchs program pays to this idea of democracy. All the conditioning we experience in civics classes about how free we are, about how this version of democracy sets us apart from every other nation in the world. But how much do they really believe in their own drivel if the fascist fart goblins selling us on this democracy swindle are busy passing laws to justify canceling out the votes for candidates they themselves don't want? Your free free, and you can vote for anybody you want, just so long as your candidate meets the qualifications written into the fine print. Also consider what this really says about how the fascist fart goblins secretly feel about the voters. They clearly fear the voters with hate and suspicion. They believe they have to pass anti-Swain legislation because they cannot trust the voters, because Ohio voters might just be stupid or crazy or angry enough to vote for me. So, by their reasoning, the fascist fart goblins have prepared to cancel out ballots in order to keep one of their own stinking up the governor's office. It appears that they think I have a better chance of legitimately winning than I do. And they need an insurance policy to keep my can of gasoline and my book of matches out of their state house. Interesting, huh? So, what would happen, I wonder, if I actually did get elected? Think about it. Imagine I got a majority of the votes. Because I'm disqualified by statutes, would they really nullify my election and hand my office over to the hierarch who came in second? Would they really tell all those Ohioans who showed up and wrote me in on their ballots that their votes don't count? That sounds like a constitutional crisis. Those voters have rights even if I don't. You'd have teams of lawyers flinging nonsense in multiple courts and hierarch leaders pontificating about competing ideals, and the mainstream media clowns attempting to provide the whole boondoggle some sense of legitimacy. A real live full-spectrum Technicolor fiasco of epic proportions. And there I'd be in the midst of it, hoping to flush Western civilization's most sacred idol down the crapper. Fun times. So, what if I won the election with 100% of the vote and nobody came in second? I'm not suggesting that even Ohio voters, who are provably the dumbest voters in all of human history, would unanimously vote for a candidate as cataclysmically and apocalyptically terrible as me. I'm simply thinking that the Ohio voting machines are all computerized, and as far as I know, they don't even use paper ballots as a backup. And I'm thinking about how Ohio was one of the states that Russian hackers penetrated in the 2016 elections. I'm not sure where Russian hackers would get the idea that they should get me elected. Well, unless they go online to a site called Enough is Enough and read my open letter to Russian hackers. There's a fantastic photo of me posted there, and I look very very governish. But what are the odds that Russian hackers would look online and check out postings at international sites addressed to Russian hackers? Recently, as if anti-Swain legislation wasn't enough to shut me down, the warden here, Shady 380, sent me a denial of a media interview request, saying Russia Today, or RT, is not permitted into the prison to talk to me about my run for governor. It would really seem that the fascist fart goblins are circling the wagons against me, huh? I'm thinking about writing special counsel Robert Mueller and asking him to come see me. Mueller is in charge of investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election, and his former agency, the FBI, has accumulated 1,410 pages of documents on me in just the last 4 years. It comes out to something like 2 pages for every 3 days. That's a lot of pages. Anyway, I'd like to meet with Mueller, who knows all about the Russian hacking. He's the one guy, more than anyone, who can probably tell me my odds of getting elected in 2018. The first election where, just maybe, the votes of only 2 people matter. And they go by Boris and Natasha. Want to dance naked around a bonfire where the Ohio State House used to be? This is Anarchist prisoner Sean Swain, candidate for Ohio governor in 2018. And I approve this message.
You can write to Sean Swain at Sean Swain 243-205, Warren CI, P.O. Box 120, 5787 State Route 63, Lebanon, Ohio 45036. Updates on his situation and more writings by Sean can be found at seanswain.org.
So we're joined by Michael, a labor organizer and teacher in West Virginia, to speak about the teacher strike across all 55 counties of that state that lasted for 12 days. We'll be chatting about the scope of the strike and its organization, how it ended, and what seeds it planted. Thanks a lot for taking the time to talk.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Would you care to introduce yourself a little further? Like what kind of job you have and what sort of like labor affiliations you have?
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher in West Virginia. I'm affiliated with the West Virginia Education Association as a building rep, and I do some other work for them. But I'm also in the IWW, and that's primarily where my tendencies in anarchism and libertarian socialism really originate from, and help to strengthen those identities.
Can you tell listeners about just sort of what led up to the labor conflict that became a strike initiated on February 22nd? Like, what sort of circumstances have West Virginia teachers been working with and teaching under?
So West Virginia is a unique state in that it is resource rich and dirt poor. It's called the resource paradox, and what Emanuel Wallerstein would identify as a peripheral state, in that West Virginia is a state in which there are plenty of natural resources. There were natural resources with the timber industry in the early 1800s that helped to fund large corporations who would extract the natural resources from the state. And then after that was the coal industry, and now we have the natural gas industry. And I bring this up because the state of economy for teachers is always dependent upon the state of economy for West Virginia itself. And teachers in this state have been dealing with declining budgets for public services pretty much since the mid-90s. After West Virginia teachers went on strike in 1990, this was at the time one of the largest statewide strikes in the country, when 47 of the 55 counties went on strike. After that strike, teachers won significant gains. They won a $5,000 pay increase spread across 3-year intervals. They won a significant new source of revenue funding for their public employees plan, for retirement, everything like that. But over the years, what we saw is pro-business Democrats would continually stonewall the pro-labor side of the Democratic Party. In 1996, for example, Charlotte Pritt, who recently ran under the Green Party affiliate in the state, was sidelined by pro-business Democrats who were upset that she had won the Democratic Party nomination, and they effectively ended her campaign in the state. So West Virginia, from the 90s onward, has been a post-industrial state where we've relied on natural resources to provide for everything from health insurance to better roads to better public services. And because of a declining tax base, we are currently in the midst of a large economic crisis, a crisis of neoliberal capitalism. And the thing that's really started this whole thing was the fact that our health insurance was set to get even worse than it was before. We were set to go from an 80-20 percentage where the state picks up 80% and we pay 20% of medical bills to a 60-40. And on top of that, they were planning on implementing this new program called Go 365. Go 365 would essentially mean that teachers and public employees had to log in a certain number of steps or time at the gym or push-ups, sit-ups, what have you, in order to not have increased premiums or deductibles the following year. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of public employees who said, you know, we're working 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and now you're expecting us to do even more to pick up the slack for the fact that we have a declining tax base to pay for these public services. And so teachers simply just felt like we had it. We felt that our unions and our associations who we were expecting to represent us were simply there to be a front for these large pro-business Democrats. For example, the state teachers unions endorsed Jim Justice when he was running for governor, and he switched to Republican, and now they're fighting against him. But there really didn't seem like there was any group fighting for us except for our fellow teachers. And what we did was We created a secret Facebook page over the summer as a way to educate, agitate, and organize for future labor actions. Over time, we ended up increasing this by bringing in all public employees, and by November, we had, I think, around 10 to 15,000 members. By the time that we ended up going on strike, our page had, I think, over 24,000 members. So this strike really originated from a decades and decades long crisis in capitalism in terms of how it's affected our state and the declining tax base. And this was essentially a powder keg that was waiting for something to set it off. And I would say our healthcare crisis was what really did us in.
Do you think something about the who's currently in charge of the federal administration had something to do with it too? Like, I know that I've heard of labor organizing being more difficult under the Democrats because they're happy to sell workers under the bus, but I wonder if the demon in chief, as it were, has sort of inspired people to take action in a way they wouldn't have before.
I would say the fact that we have it, I mean, West Virginia is unique in the sense that we have been a reliably blue Democratic state pretty much up to the 2000s for the presidential elections and until like very recently, the past few years in the state legislature. So the fact that we've not really had any effective leadership from either political party has shown us that the political parties in power are really only there to represent themselves. And furthermore, the fact that we had ineffective union leadership until very recently in that sense has made us realize that in order to make change, we have to have it within ourselves to do so. So I would say the fact that our state feels that there was a crisis in leadership across the board was also an inspiring factor to realize that we needed this strike to occur and to originate from the rank and file.
So can you talk a little bit, you've talked a little bit about how some of the planning for the strike occurred on the secret Facebook pages and widened out to more state employees from there. Can you talk a little bit about how the strike got implemented and how it shifted as the union's position shifted in the relationship with the government?
Well, when we implemented the strike, it was this weird symbiosis of union leadership combined with rank and file members, and it sort of went like this. Over the summer and early fall, we started working on a plan to have a massive rally in the state's capital on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so we slowly were deciding how we were going to begin agitating and setting up meetings. So we tried to popularize this page and add fellow teachers to it. Eventually someone added someone from the executive committee who found out about the page and basically ratted us out. But by the time that they had done that, we were already so well organized and the page had so many people on it that they realized they couldn't stop this. So what happened after November was union leadership basically took charge. They started helping us set up planning for buses, for meetings at the Capitol, for meeting with our delegates, basic coordination efforts. And that worked in the beginning prior to the walkouts. And initially, union leadership had called for statewide action for a 2-day walkout in mid-February. This for a Thursday and Friday walkout. We had prepared for that walkout. After that, however, union leadership had to meet with the governor and come to an agreement, and they eventually agreed to a 5% raise based on Governor Justice's assessment of the situation. However, after they made that announcement, the fact that the teachers stayed on strike and what turned it into a wildcat strike was the fact that teachers and community leaders across the state realized that the Republican Senate could not be trusted until a deal was made and it was signed into law. So the community leaders decided we're staying on strike, we're not going back, and they forced leadership's hand to support us as we continued on with the strike. So the strategies of this strike were essentially mass organization and communication using this secret Facebook group, and to develop sort of a hive mind mentality where if one post really attracted a lot of attention, to make sure that it reached the top of the page, that Facebook's algorithm would recognize that post as an important post through likes and comments and things like that. So if someone was going through their Facebook and just refreshing, that was the first thing they saw. And then it was expected that those posters would then take that information and disseminate it to people in real time, whether it was on their own Facebook page, whether it was through basic conversations they were having with other teachers in the cafeteria. And that was our way of trying to get that information out there as effectively as possible, so it didn't just stay in one closed niche.
That's like some cyber council communism you got going on. That's pretty crazy. That's really interesting that you were able to use that tool to decentralize decision making and get folks that were already going to be using that platform in all these different areas to sort of coalesce and make decisions without and coming under the radar of notice necessarily of, you know, union officials or school administrators.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, because this Facebook page was actually started by socialists of various tendencies. I come from the anarchist tradition. I have fellow workers and comrades who come from more of a democratic socialist background, some from a Marxist-Leninist background, and we all joined together and realized that if this was going to work, it had to be built on a broad leftist tendency. And I would say, honestly, what I saw developing, not just on this online space, but within the communities themselves, was sort of an anarcho-syndicalist overview of organizing, right? So we organize in this digital space, and there's no central hierarchy determining when we go on strike, what we go on strike for, but we develop similar concepts of what we're fighting for. And because we don't have to be told where to go or what to do, we feel we have more ownership of our actions. We're much more likely to engage in those behaviors. We're much more likely to feel like we're doing these actions on our own, that this movement is coming from within us. And when we feel that control, we also feel like we deserve to control our workplaces as well. This workplace organizing that treats the workplace as a political domain, and that if we're going to organize in the workplace, it can't come from business unionism. It can't come from these high-paid representatives from our associations. It comes from the people who are in those classrooms every day.
I'd like to talk for a second about how organizing works in the South, or union membership. So a lot of states in the South tend to be right-to-work states. Can you talk about what that means and how the existent mainstream unions survive and operate under that regime?
I would say right to work is a brilliant reactionary ploy to divide the working class, at least if we're talking a rhetorical strategy. The way they've injected this notion into the public discourse is a phenomenal understanding of modern labor disputes. And essentially the way I understand right to work is a corrupted attempt to basically piggyback off of businesses' attempt to divide the working class into smaller and smaller segments. In West Virginia, the way it works with right to work in this state, and it was only recently passed, was they can't have closed union shops. So you can't require someone to have union membership as a condition for employment in a store or in the public workplace. You can't have that. But the problem is, because of right to work, that means there becomes a free rider problem. So fewer and fewer people are going to pay union dues, but they're more and more likely to receive union benefits. And because no one wants to spend a few $100s on union dues, they are going to opt out of those union contracts and still receive the benefits from their primary unions. So in West Virginia, because we were already sort of living in what some people are calling a post-Janus world, based on the Supreme Court case that was recently argued, we have had to find a way to organize without the benefit of collective bargaining, without the benefit of strong unions in the state. And what we found was the unions can be a valuable tool for injecting our radical discourse. They can be used as vehicles for certain words or phrases like solidarity to push for a more leftist radical agenda. Yet at the same time, we also collectively realize the limits of business unionism. We realize the limits of these associations that have been continuously weakened by reactionary legislation. And so our organizing strategy was essentially to work within the system that was in place with these unions, but really only to use them as far as they could get us. If the unions were able to get people out to certain meetings more effectively than we could, then we would use those strategies to help us further our cause. But if we felt that the unions weren't doing enough to push for more extreme measures, such as continuing the strike, then we could opt out of dealing within those unions and create separate spaces of individuals in sort of like an autonomous online collective, if you will, I guess. And through this strategy, I mean, the interesting thing is we realize, like, we don't need these large business unions to fight our battles. We need them currently to serve as figureheads for a larger cause, and we might need them for statewide organization efforts that legally we might not be able to engage in. But in terms of on-the-ground organizing, we were the ones who started at the rank and file, and we never had a need for those large business unions.
So as far as the way that y'all were able to organize yourselves and agitate, educate, and organize others, as you said, can you talk a little bit about the IWW's model and method and what it means to be dual membership?
Yeah, dual membership is an interesting facet within the IWW. It depends. I would say dual membership depends on who you're talking to. Currently in West Virginia, because we have so few members in the IWW, it makes sense to dual members, to be a dual carder. So the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, their model for leadership is a very, it's a horizontal leadership model in the sense that there's not one direct leader calling the shots. There's not one person who serves as a president or executive director who makes unilateral decisions for the union. We work based on an industrial union model, meaning that we organize people based on the working class. So if you're a member of the working class and you have to sell your labor to survive, you're not a boss, you're not a class trader, you're not a politician. If you survive through selling your labor in a way that contributes to society, then you can be a member of the IWW. And by organizing through industrial unionism, the phrase "an injury to one is an injury to all" was popularized under this union. I guess an example might be better. In the early 1900s, for example, if you were a dock worker, the American Federation of Labor had separate contracts with people who performed different tasks on docks. So you would have the people who were in control of the dock management. You would have people who were in control of shipping and transport. You would have people, a union for people who did loading and unloading at the dock. And if one sector of that labor went on strike, essentially they were saying shut the whole thing down so that you could have greater bargaining rights. Well, the American Federation of Labor was very poor in enforcing those strike mandates. And so it was very easy to bring in scabs to break those strikes up if they were organized through the AFL or if a union was affiliated with the AFL. The IWW, however, said, if we organize everyone in the working class together in one big union, then if one person on the docks feels they have a grievance with management and they decide to shut down the labor, then everyone should go on strike. Everyone should participate because we're essentially we're all in this together, and by collectively shutting down that market, we have greater bargaining power. We can gain more through our mass strikes. And so currently in West Virginia, we're trying to organize on that industrial union model, and I think we're ripe for it. So we were upset, and anecdotally from teachers I was speaking with, we're upset that we had to organize based on a business union model. We had to organize based on our different sectors of employment, and we had a whole variation of unions who might be sympathetic or supportive to us, but they weren't on strike. They couldn't go on strike. They had to support us from a distance. And because they weren't able to actively support us, it caused the strike to drag out longer and longer and longer. What we're witnessing in this state is by organizing through an industrial union model, we could actually strike more effectively. We could shut down highway management. We could shut down school systems. We could shut down, and this is a possibility, I don't know how dangerous it would be, but it's a possibility, emergency services. That when people realize that, if you're going to have an entire sector of employment that is completely underfunded, understaffed, overworked, with longer hours and poorer benefits, then calling for a general strike to demand greater action might have to be the way to go. And instead of organizing with these various unions, organizing under one big branch might solve those problems quicker. I think that's actually the model that we're headed towards. We just need to have that effective ground game right now, that effective organization to push for it and agitate for it. But the people's support is there.
So can you talk a little bit about how the strike ended, what you feel the takeaways are, and the sort of like impacts that are still resounding around different parts of the country? Like there's teachers in Oklahoma that are considering a strike. There were I think was it Frontier Communications in West Virginia was considering a strike and was pointing to the public school teachers as an example for how their methodology was a powerful approach.
Yeah, the CWA, the communications workers, I actually had a chance to meet with them on the picket line on Monday, and they're essentially in a similar case as us. They're arguing with Frontier Communications for a lack of job security. Frontier Communications wants to cut hundreds of jobs and bring in non-union workers to fill those jobs. And one of the workers I spoke with said he is responsible for bringing high-speed internet and quality cell phone service to thousands of rural, poor individuals across the state, and students especially. And that when he's not able to effectively do that job, the students suffer and our communities suffer. And he saw his fight tied up in our fight, that when teachers are succeeding, he's succeeding, and when he does well, the schools succeed. And he realized in this conversation, and I realized in this conversation, that our fight can't be one that's separated into these different business unions. It had to be one combined together. And at the end of our strike on Tuesday, when they made a deal, essentially what they agreed to, what the Republican Senate agreed to, was a 5% raise for all public employees by taking money out of the budget for things like highway maintenance, a few $1 million from some scholarship funds that are being redirected elsewhere, to fund this pay raise. And a lot of the teachers felt it was a good step in the right direction, but we were upset at the fact that a lot of us felt like capitalism won. Capitalism won in the sense that there was no natural gas severance tax to fund long-term proposals for our health insurance. There was a bill that was put up during the strike, I believe, a co-tenancy bill that would allow natural gas industries to essentially gobble up private property rights if 75% of the landowners in that area agreed to sell off their land to these companies. So if you're a small landowner in southern West Virginia and you're in poverty, you're incentivized to sell off your land to these large corporations who are going to make billions of dollars in profits off of your land. And if your neighbor decides they don't want to sell their land, well, under this new law, they essentially don't have a choice. They either have to sell their land or the companies can use their land without their permission. And our governor said he was going to push for a special session to get this through because he wanted the oil and natural gas industries to start coming in and essentially create this massive, what he thinks is an economic boom, but what we realize is basically destroying our environment and putting labor out of work. So teachers were happy to be back, but they realized that there is such power in the corruption of our legislature that even a 9-day school strike, one of the largest, if not the largest wildcat strike in U.S. history, has now been played for fools. We've been played for fools. We've allowed them to succeed. We've allowed them to have their massive funding rights without even a peep. So the strike ended. We're happy to be back. We're happy that we won this gain, but we're also cautious to celebrate this as a total victory because we know that the fight really has only begun.
Well, Michael, thank you very much. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we sign off?
Yeah. If you're interested in participating in what's being called General Strike 2018, hashtag General Strike 2018, feel free to message me on Facebook. I run the West Virginia IWW Facebook page. We're always looking to reach out to people across the country who are interested in these actions. And if you are wondering how West Virginia strike went down, and if you want some information, we're always happy to help, happy to share that with you. We want the strikes to spread. We want capitalism to realize that this is labor's final reckoning with it and continue to agitate because we want this to go well before it's too late.
Well, it seems like these sort of, to me, it seems like these sort of actions and this sort of organizing can't lead to anything but people finding strength with each other and in opposition to capitalism, and that sounds pretty awesome to me. Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this and for being a teacher. Teachers are awesome.
I appreciate that. Solidarity forever.
And that was Burst's interview with Michael of West Virginia IWW about the recent West Virginia teachers' strike. Before our next interview, please enjoy some Dropkick Murphys covering Which Side Are You On?, the famous labor struggle anthem.
Nazi scab, or will you be a man? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Don't scare for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you
And now here's our interview with Miel about the Southeast Trans and/or Women's Action Camp. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Would you say a little bit about who you are and talk a little bit about some projects that you do?
Yeah, my name is Miel. I identify as trans-masculine and I use they/them pronouns. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I am helping organize the Southeast Trans and/or Women's Action Camp in Appalachia in April. I'm a former J-20 defendant, one of the 6 who were acquitted on all charges in December, and I continue to organize with Defend J-20 Resistance to support the remaining 59 defendants still facing charges. I'm a trained street medic as well. I'm part of Appalachian Medical Solidarity, and as of recently, I also help with Transmission Prison Project to send books to LGBTQ prisoners across the country. I'm a massage therapist by trade, focusing my practice on healing trauma and prioritizing accessibility for queer and trans and POC and social justice-oriented folks.
Sick. Thanks. So you were here to talk about the Southeast Trans and/or Women's Action Camp that is going to be held here in April, you said? Right?
Yes.
Would you talk about this camp and tell the listeners a little bit about how the organizers got the idea for this event and what the goals are?
Yeah, so the Southeast Trans and/or Women's Action Camp, or SETWAC, will take place on April 22nd to the 29th near Asheville, North Carolina. TWAC is an action camp for folks who identify as female, trans, trans women, trans men, genderqueer, gender variant, two-spirited, agender, and otherwise non-cis male identifying people, to build power and amplify voices within our community, to heal and strengthen our cultures of resistance. It's an approach to smashing patriarchy and opposing all forms of oppression through direct action, skill sharing, and mutual aid for the sake of individual and collective liberation for all. TWAC camps have been happening across the country for several years. The idea for organizing this TWAC in the Southeast United States came about through the group Smoky Mountain Eco Defense, or SMED, with a desire to find an avenue to strengthen connections within our community and organize resistance against the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in this region, as well as the Bayou Bridge Pipeline in Louisiana. We want to use this camp as an opportunity to continue having conversations about a wide range of environmental and social issues. It is particularly important to us in organizing this camp that we prioritize the voices of Indigenous and Black activists and comrades, especially in the South. This 4-day camp will offer workshops and discussions on a wide range of topics, including urban and rural direct action, earth skills, conflict resolution, botany, tree climbing, anti-fascist and anti-racist organizing, Black leadership training, prisoner support, security culture, DIY medicine and first aid, herbalism, and much more. And some of the caucuses that we will have will include, but are not limited to, POC, mixed race, MAD camp, parents, trans women, gender and sexuality-based violence survivors, non-drinkers, and any more that you'd like to create.
So are the workshops can people suggest topics for the workshops?
Yeah, absolutely. As part of the registration process, we are encouraging people to suggest workshops that they'd like to see, as well as let us know if there are workshops or discussions that they feel they want to bring to the camp.
That's really cool. I really like it when groups do that. You mentioned Smoky Mountain Eco Defense. Do you feel comfortable saying a few words about them?
Sure, yeah, that's not a group that I'm personally a part of, but some of the other organizers for the camp are. And it's a environmental, eco-justice based collective of people organizing activism around environmental issues.
Nice. I think it's really cool that this camp and many of the other TWACs that I am familiar with are blending sort of like ecological justice issues with a more like nuanced conversation on like gender intersectionalities and race intersectionalities, because I know that much of the like eco-justice scene, especially the ones that are like a bit more institutionalized, are a bit light on those kinds of topics, and I really appreciate that y'all are doing this. I think it's really, really important stuff to be focusing on. On that topic, would you talk a little bit about, the importance of having an action camp be organized along gender lines, such as the ones outlined in the mission statement for SETWAC?
Yeah, thank you. This camp will serve as a safer space for people of diverse gender identities who are systematically overshadowed by our cis-normative and androcentric radical movements, in addition to the larger male-dominated society that we all live in. The relationship between environmental movements and transformative racial and gender-related justice is crucial and something that we hope to create more discussion around. It's our goal to empower those of us who are systematically silenced and oppressed due to these socially constructed gender and racial inequalities, to have our voices be heard, and to bring together communities of resistance in spaces that consciously subvert the power dynamics we often experience in male-dominated spaces.
Yeah, definitely. So this project has had its fundraising platform be pulled out from under it twice now. What do you think happened there, or like what was going on with that, do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of been a headache. These fundraiser sites have really given us the runaround. Both the fundraiser, FUNDRAZR, and UCaring sites work through this payment system called WePay. UCaring sent us an email deeming our campaign unsafe and unfit for their platform. And then while fundraiser didn't shut down our site, WePay through fundraiser denied our funding account. So it seems like this happened for the same pretty vague reasons of safety or unfitness for whatever platform they tend to be working with. And we've tried to inquire further and have gotten no response.
Yeah.
We imagine it might be due to the direct action-oriented theme of the camp, but really are unsure as to the extent of the concerns involved there.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't surprise me at all. And to be clear, like, when we talk about, like, your fundraising platform having been yanked out from under you, like, all of the funds were refunded. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. All of the money went back to the people who donated to us, but then we had to track all of them down and kindly ask them to resubmit funds to us in a different format.
That does sound like a headache.
Yeah.
So, will you talk about the space that the camp is going to be held on? Obviously, like, in as vague terms as is called for, or as specific as you want to get. Specifically, though, what should folks keep in mind if they're planning to go?
So the camp will be held on a piece of land in the mountains about 30 minutes northwest of Asheville. We have not yet disclosed the exact location publicly for the sake of security, but once you complete the registration form, you will receive email updates on how to get to camp. Parking on the land is limited, so we're encouraging everyone to try to carpool if possible. We will be setting up a rideshare board soon to help folks coordinate that. And in terms of the space itself, I want people to keep in mind that this camp is mostly going to be held outside, with the majority of participants camping. So bring a tent, a sleeping bag, a tarp, and any other gear or supplies that you might need to be comfortable. There are a very limited number of indoor sleeping spaces at the house on the property, and we're reserving these specifically for folks who otherwise would not be able to attend based on the camping arrangements. We're prioritizing these spaces for people with mobility and other disability issues. Since it'll be the springtime, dress accordingly. It should be pretty nice during the days, but it still could get chilly at night, so bring extra layers. Also keep in mind the potential for rain, so bringing a raincoat and boots can always be helpful, and maybe an extra tarp. Also bring headlamps, flashlights, utensils, plates, cups, things like that. It's always nice to have toilet paper, and come prepared to pack out any trash that you might have. There's no cell phone reception in the location where this camp will be held, so expect to be mostly technology free during camp. Depending on your cell phone provider, it might be possible to get signal if you go out onto the main roadways, but there's also Wi-Fi in one of the buildings on site for emergency situations. Something that we're asking of folks is if you're able to bring extra camping supplies to share with those who might be in need, please do so. As of right now, we don't have much spare camping gear to offer, but we're hoping that'll change over the next month or so. Like I said, there is a big house that is currently being renovated with a kitchen where communal meals will be prepared. So in addition to donating funds to help cover the cost of putting on the camp, we're asking folks to bring food donations to contribute to these communal meals that will be prepared. We're specifically asking for bulk staple items such as rice, beans, bread, oil, fruits and vegetables, eggs, granola, and things like that. There will be accommodations for dietary restrictions, but we encourage people to bring personal snack items as well.
You mentioned eggs, but is it going to be an ideologically vegan or vegetarian space?
As far as I know, no. I think
Okay.
we want to accommodate all dietary needs, including vegan and gluten-free, but also having space for people who do eat meat. There's also going to be childcare set up for parents that want to come with their little ones. So we're looking for volunteers to help with that, but we will have space set up to hang out with the kids. In terms of dogs, the land that is hosting the camp is a working farm, so we're asking folks not to bring dogs if at all possible. If you have a service animal that you feel you need to have with you, please contact us ahead of time so we can discuss it. And the last thing I want to add is that anyone who's planning on coming to camp, if you're available to arrive early and or stay after camp ends, we could definitely use assistance with setup and breakdown, and there will be someone on site the day before and the day after to facilitate that.
This is a huge project. Yeah, I mean, this should come as no surprise maybe to anyone who's participated in something like this, but yeah, it's an immense amount of work, and thank you all for doing it.
Absolutely.
So the last question that I have is, since your fundraising platform, former fundraising platforms were pulled, what is the new fundraising platform, and how can folks register, and if they cannot attend, how can they be involved, support this event?
So after those repeated struggles with the fundraising platforms, we kind of gave up on fundraiser sites and decided to just go very simply with a PayPal account. So now fundraising donations can be directed to paypal.me/SETWAC 2018. That's SETWAC 2018.
Gotcha.
And the link to the registration form is on our website, which is ctwac.blackblogs.org. And if you cannot attend TWAC this year, please consider donating so others can benefit from attending camp. Also, please spread the word and invite all your friends. We have some flyers going around that will be up on the website soon, and are trying to get it out on social media as much as possible.
Yeah, I was going to ask about a social media presence like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Are you aware of any accounts such as that people can follow?
I don't think we have any social media specific to SETWAC at this time. That might change as organizing continues to happen in the next month and a half. But as of right now, we're just spreading it through other networks and trying to get the word out there with some social media that already have large presence.
Excellent. That's all the questions that I have. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
That's all about TWAC. I just want to take this opportunity to plug something else that's happening right before TWAC really quick.
Yeah, please do.
That's also in the Southeast, and that's a sailboat meetup happening in New Orleans. It's called the Dirty Coast Sailboat Meetup, It's a DIY Skillshare gathering for punks and anarchists interested in sailing, and it'll be happening from April 19th through the 22nd, so just days before the TWAC event happens. So we're encouraging people to try to attend one or both, and if you're going from New Orleans to the TWAC camp, consider caravanning and inviting some people along for the ride. All of it should be a really good time, and I think we have an exciting spring, April season to look for.
Is it a how-to sail or like how to build boats, or?
I imagine it'll be a little bit of everything. There will be folks, there's the Telltales Collective, which is a group of folks that live in New Orleans who have a sailboat that they have as an access for the community to use, and they're encouraging other boats to come in. There'll be workshops on navigation and how to do boat repairs and how to navigate with the weather, and all sorts of different things. Pretty much whatever people bring to the table is what will happen. There's been a few of these similar types of meetups over the last few years that I've been involved with, so I'm really excited to see how this one goes.
That's really cool. Yeah, Miel, thanks for coming onto the show and for the interview and for doing all the work you're doing with SETWAC. It sounds like a really cool event.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. To reiterate the dates, this event will happen April 26th through 28th, not the 22nd through 28th as mentioned in the interview. Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM LP at 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you're free to do so. Just send us an email if you end up using any content. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville, specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events, at their website, firestorm.coop.